And with that, the second day of a three-day convention for the NDP has come to a close here at the Hamilton Convention Centre as CPAC continues its special live coverage. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio, and we're joined right now once again by Kim Wright, Principal with Wright Strategies, and James Valcke, Director of Research and Strategy at Viewpoints, a pair that I've now dubbed the Kim and Jim Show as they join us, but also pointing out that you're delegates to this convention, not just with your companies. But a lot to discuss, but I think it's first and foremost important to talk about the resolutions that were just passed. Now, these were emergency resolutions brought up not ahead of the convention, but as the convention came together. And let's go through them one by one, because the first one had to do with pharmacare. And that was actually a fairly quick debate because people stood up, unanimously said, let's just call a vote, and they did. And in doing so, they basically say that the pharmacare deal, as outlined in the Supply and Confidence Agreement, needs to be a public system. So I'm wondering from both of you, one, what type of pressure does that put on NDP MPs to make sure it is public pharmacare? And two, does that put pressure for them to actually walk away from Supply and Confidence if it doesn't remain public before the end of the year? Because that's the deadline as outlined in the agreement. What do you say to that, Kim?
So the pharmacare deal has always been critical to the confidence supply agreement because we've heard the Liberals in platform after platform, sometimes they want it, sometimes they don't. This was our opportunity to hold the government to account to make sure that pharmacare that will benefit Canadians is part of this. And for viewers who happen to have an insurance policy, maybe they have to front load them. Maybe they don't. But the parliamentarians certainly have a really good pharmacare program, so I think that they should have that extended to all Canadians. This matters to people because what often happens if you don't have access to the prescriptions you need after you've seen the publicly accessible doctor, then you're going to end up not being served well and you're going to end up back in hospital or worse. So this is a very important thing to New Democrats. In fact, Tommy Douglas once said that if he had it all to do over again, he would have made sure that pharmacare was part of that deal. So what we saw is the confidence and supply agreement has always said that pharmacare is important. This gives a deadline and gives more teeth to that as Parliament deliberates.
But is walking away from Supply and Confidence something that the NDP caucus is actually willing to do? Because that would necessarily mean that the governing Liberals do not actually have the majority in the House without the support of the NDP. So what type of pressure does that create, that type of resolution?
I wouldn't use the term pressure. I would say it's a strong mandate. The membership has spoken. They voted unanimously in favor of this motion, and it explicitly says that the MPs are to walk away, that the leadership is to take this information and go to their partners and say, this is the mandate we have. This is what we're looking towards. It's still within their prerogative to how to navigate that forward in the timelines that they see fit. But this is a strong direction to the leadership. At a convention where members can often say, that doesn't go quite far enough. This one goes far enough, and they agreed unanimously, which I think is an important note for those watching today. I mean, it's a strong message to the leadership and to the Liberals that the membership, the party is united behind the caucus going forward on this issue.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point because, you know, the question is, oftentimes is, how willing is the NDP to walk away from the agreement? I guess the flip side of it is how willing are Liberals right now to walk away from that agreement given the polling numbers, because as we all know, the trend line has not been positive for the Liberals on this.
Gosh, politics playing into any of this? Of course it does. But that being said, this is the right thing for Canadians. And as we talked about last evening, and you'll hear New Democrats talk about this, the lived experience of Canadians, the affordability, these aren't academic discussions. These are personal. These are what keeps families up at night. How are they going to pay for those very expensive drugs that are so necessary to every aspect of their lives? That's what New Democrats are fighting for. It's what they were sent to Parliament to do. And that's what we're going to do. And if the Liberals decide to play games with this, decide to play games with people's lives because they're maybe up or maybe they're spoiling for a fight with Pierre Poilievre, we're here to fight for Canadians. That's what we will always do.
Okay, did you want to say something on that?
I'm only going to add that, you know, it's not just New Democrats. I think this is a message to stakeholders, to labor organizations, to health coalitions, to let them know that New Democrats are united in this issue and are be driving hard to the goal with it.
Yeah, and make no mistake about that. United is what we saw in this room because they waived the debate. It had unanimous passing by all the delegates, and then everybody stood up on their feet, clapping and chanting NDP. But, let's get to the other resolution that was of note here, and that has to do with the emergency resolution on Israel and what's happening right now in Gaza. And I'm going to read the resolution here because, one, it's detailed, and two, I want to get it right. So basically, the resolution calls for the release of all hostages, demands on a ceasefire and life-saving humanitarian assistance for Gazans, support investigations on war crimes, condemn all acts of anti-Semitism and, quote, anti-Palestinian hate, focus on building a just peace, is how it's described, respecting rights of Israelis and Palestinians. There was, for a moment there, a motion to actually refer this to committee. But it did go ahead and it was passed. Why was that important for the party to engage in right now?
This is, first of all, this is almost the definition of an emergency resolution, getting it here. But what we've also seen over the past few days is unspeakable atrocities. I'm a concert goer. Can you imagine being at Coachella or any concert anywhere and have gunmen come in and kidnap people, murder people, rape people on the bodies of their friends? Let's all pause and watch our humanity about this. We've also seen rally after rally where some of the chants very much are kill Jews. These are not easy conversations to have. These are weighty conversations that require people to say, well, maybe I don't know enough about history, but I do know right from wrong. I do know humanity. And what we saw here today in this resolution that went through was a recognition of the humanity, a recognition that Canada should have a role in saying, we want to find a peaceful solution to this, but absolutely recognizing that the acts of anti-Semitism and the anti-Palestinian situation is untenable and frankly un-Canadian. And we need to get to and be united as a party to get through that.
James?
Yeah, I think, again, agreeing wholeheartedly with Kim, I do think that the resolution, the context of where we are now is people are trying to find what their direction forward is going to look like. It is the definition of an emergency resolution. Heather McPherson, the NDP's foreign affairs critic, has masterfully navigated this situation with members supporting her. I think that it's hopeful that the conversations have been largely constructive. There are people hurting so much right now, and I think the conversations will evolve publicly and within individual parties about what the future looks like. And for New Democrats, that's important, and we had that discussion today, I think.
But there was, and I need to raise this with you too, because there was, as you both know, a small protest that happened in the hallways of the convention center. And it was a group that was more vocal than what we saw in here about fighting for what they see as Palestinian rights being trampled, speaking out against the occupation. And in many ways, it did echo the final resolution, but also, as I said, more vociferous, and they weren't allowed to speak. Can you talk to us about what actually happened there and why that decision was made?
Well, in a number of instances, those people were not delegates, that they decided to come into the hall or try to come into the hall and protest. And I will always defend people's right to free speech, but this also needs to be a safe space for delegates to have those conversations. And there were chants in there that were disturbing, and I'm not going to get into the litigation of that. But what I can say is that there were a lot of hurtful things that people may or may not have thought it were hurtful at the time. They absolutely were, and we make sure that people are safe in these debates and discussions. Whether or not, these people weren't delegates, that's partially why they couldn't come in. And that's standard practice for every organization. But we also have to make sure that when, again, that take a breath, find your humanity. Understanding these conversations are not hard, are not easy, and they're very difficult, and they're very personal to people. One of the things I'm so glad that this was an in-person convention for was to be able to have those human conversations. outside of the rallying cries, but actually having human conversations and human interactions. Check on your friends, check on your loved ones. All of this is hard.
James, what do you say that? Because there was a big focus on creating a safe space, and that was reiterated, because there were moments in this debate where clearly things looked like they could have gone off the rails, and people worked very hard to get it back, and there was talk about creating safe space and respectfulness. What do you say to that protest? Because without a doubt, whether or not you agree with them, the people there that wanted to be heard were not heard, and they were complaining about that.
Again, agreeing with what Kim had said, this safe space thing is important in that there are people that emotions are close to the surface. There were some disruptors who were intent on disrupting this event that has been by and large constructive, healing in some ways. And I think that they were dealt with accordingly. It's unfortunate that their actions with the intent of causing disruption and taking up attention succeeded to a certain degree. But make no mistake that the delegates, from what I've talked to, are leaving this place stronger because of the conversations that were had today, regardless of the protests.
Okay, well, that's the punctuation on day 2 from the Kim and Jim show. But we will speak again before this is done, without a doubt. Thank you for that today, Kim Wright and James Valcke.